Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Reacts, where today we have ourselves a track from an act named Serpentis titled Soul. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on the screen on Spotify here. There is the art, got 12k plays, which is a great effort. We're going to listen through this track from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. I just want to let you know that at the end as well that we're going to be giving the song an overall score out of 10 based on various musical criteria, but for now, let's go. Let's listen through it. What do we got?
I know that by keeping others at a distance, you avoid a betrayal of your trust, but you must endure the loneliness. Man can never completely erase this sadness, because all men are fundamentally alone. Pain is something man must carry in his heart. Since the heart feels pain so easily, some believe that life is pain.
Life is pain. Disinfect me, I am drowning in emptiness, drowning pain. Hellish feeler, fire burn as a splitter, I'm to be seen. I can resurrect or change for the better and change your ways, but you ain't ready for me. Day or the weather, you fear the blaze. I am the one, I am the blaze. Hide from the sun, you hear my pain. I am the serpent, baby, serpent desire. I slit your face, gouge out weeping eyes, then eat them for dinner. I love the taste. I had I sickly sinner, desecrate decadence on my plate. You too slow for me, just pick up your liver, keep up the pace. You too scared to seek the edge, hide from the needle, I taste the blade. I am the one now. They stand and bow down. They take to fear in my walk, but still they guns down. The shell is cracking, this egg is black seed. I am the raven, the vulture, eat my bones and my flesh screams.
Great change of pace there.
So they don't test me. On to the next scene. Ravage me, all you liars colliding at midnight. Think of me when you're down on your knees with my God. Oh, let's pray for the game. Play for the pieces, won't play with a shame. Enduring my focus, my sternum is broken. Sinner, steady, checkmate, count the change. Are you ready for the game? No, you're scared of the change. Oh, you're losing your focus, the pain is unspoken. The egg that is cracking madness and savvy, I'm gold. I am the one now. They stand and bow down. They take to fear in my walk, but still they guns down. My shell is cracking, this egg is black seed. I am the raven, the vulture, eat my bones, my flesh screams. I am the seed of Lilith, I am the seed of kings. I am the resurrected, since you've been confessing. Say 20 Hail Mary. Say Satan has left me, but still the loneliness carries the pain of life screams.
You've got that broken telephone line at the end, like the calls ended. That was a really surreal experience. Not completely alien to me after again listening through Ismai, but I enjoyed my time with it. We're going to talk about it more in the conclusion. And so welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Serpentis titled Soul. In this section, I'm going to provide an overall sort of song analysis of this track, as well as any sort of applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general experience as a listener's perspective, my sort of thoughts on that. I also gave the song an overall score 8 out of 10 based on the various musical criteria here, which I feel is a strong score. A lot of stuff in this track was done really, really well. But first of all, before we go any further, what do we think this track is about? I think this track is it's discussing the fact that people are alone by our nature, and we have to sort of carry ourselves and deal with that pain, and that pain is living and everything like that. And then we talk about in the second half of it, Saint Serpentis, their perspective of having gone through that pain to rise up and finding a sort of power within that independence, that autonomy, and being able to sort of like lord over others, and just sort of like discussing the danger that comes from sort of striking them or kind of coming at them. I mean, like, iodine, sickly sinner, desecrate, decadence, on my plate, you too slow for me, just pick up your liver. These are really interesting lyrics. I like that at the start we had that kind of quote, especially with the demented sounding sort of effects chains on the vocals. It made it sound almost kind of sadistic, I suppose, in a sense, inferring more of a mood on what we were discussing there. So it was kind of refreshing when Saint Serpentis came in with the sort of rapped parts, the spoken rap parts, and their voice was less processed and more sort of straightforward. You kind of got the feeling it was them saying it, their own perspective, but we had additional kind of like overdubs and layers on the sides as well to kind of build it up and make it seem a little bit more sort of like dramatic. Like in the Raven the Vulture, Eat My Bones and My Flesh Screams part, it's like the choir coming up with them. It just becomes more and more sort of like theatrical and cinematic, I suppose, because I suppose a lot of this track, what it comes down to for me is like a spectacle, an event. It sounds like a soundtrack you'd hear on like an action movie or something like that, or like a thriller, or like even maybe a horror film or something like that. And I like the discord there. I feel like it suits a lot of what we're discussing within the lyrics. But I think that especially with a track at 2 minutes 49, the splitting again of the kind of quote or the spoken part and then sort of Serpentis' perspective with really sort of solid vocal technique without over articulating there. There's angst and a bit of sort of stress and pressure behind it, but it's also very authoritative and calm and calculated. And it's charismatic as well, which I feel is just so incredibly important for this kind of music, because the last thing you want is to have a song where we're discussing these kind of things, but you don't really care about what they're talking about. I also like the kind of tinge of vulnerability. They take to fearing my walk, but they still guns down. Or still they guns down. My shell is cracking. No, never mind. I've misconstrued that. It's more like the shell is cracking on a rebirth or something like that. But then we also say, but still the loneliness carries the pain of ice cream. So despite the power that they have, they are still struggling with the existence, that the existence that power brings. Ultimately, though, just a really interesting story. It's great to hear more stuff like this. It's a unique perspective. I think people are just gonna just think it's really cool, to be blunt. Not necessarily that it's sort of relatable, I suppose, but when you go for this kind of style of storytelling and persona with the music, you need to really commit to the bit. I feel that we've done that there. Structurally, at 2 minutes 49 is well laid out. There, again, is this spoken quoted part at the start there, which sets the scene and gives you a bit of kind of an alternate perspective to what we get into when we go into the actual sort of Serpentis' sort of vocal parts there. And we have verses and choruses there and adjustments. And it's kind of a chapterized kind of approach. I suppose in that regard, it's kind of through composed to a certain extent. I think a lot of the power or majesty behind this sort of resides in the way that the instruments carry the piece and the mood of it. And it's not just that you have this kind of robotic kind of synthesized vocal kind of style at the beginning going through that sort of initial kind of section. You also have these kind of thud kind of cinematic basses and sort of orchestral drums that go dum, kind of like the Transformers soundtrack, with kind of like a bit of sort of a dubstepish kind of like groove going on with some of the way they warble and kind of come backwards and forwards. It's almost like getting the drop immediately. And there are these kind of industrial sort of synth layers there with some filtered drums that provide a really intense ambience to it that leaves a sense of uncertainty about what's going to happen next. You're hearing this and it sounds like the pain that they're describing with the loneliness, but you also aren't necessarily sure at the beginning how that's going to translate to a song. When they talk about that life is pain part, especially after the kind of animosity displayed by the backing parts, the bass, the drum elements, and the vocals, the life is pain part is so simple in contrast to that. And it really is so cool because you just are kind of like left to kind of only be consoled by that, and you get more kind of context with Saint Serpentis as they go further, but it's just nice to know that to have less is more in that part. You accent the certain words and have rhythmic unison between the instrumental components there before we add more to it. The minor leaning of those synth sequences we have around the minute mark is just fantastic. It's aggressive, sort of like a cyberpunkish kind of way. Like this is a futuristic conversation that we're trying to have about something that's kind of otherworldly or interstellar. I also like the little boom, but it's the ear candy and tails they have on them as they sort of loop things. We have this main sort of bass line that's put forward even though it's got a lower mid resonance. And you just have these little bits of ear candy, and again, as I mentioned, the charisma, the energy behind the vocals helps to carry it. But then you have these kind of sutured, kind of discordant sort of synth layers kind of looping over each other as we go through the piece. working between either minor or sort of like diminished. And then you have this kind of spooky, almost kind of synthy woodwindish kind of tone to the melodies kind of looping or arpeggiating. And it's incredibly uncomfortable and sad sounding. It's like we're grieving for the fear of the change that's occurring. And there's these wonderful reverb tails on these sort of like percussive hits there that kind of thud and kind of like sound like rocks colliding into the earth. It just smacks of the gravity of the situation. And the kind of interesting thing about it is that it is just so, it's not particularly melodic for a lot of it. The kind of extra coloration comes in as we go further forth. And I like that we're not overcomplicating some of the stages of it to add more sort of prominence to the vocal parts, because they are the main focal point, and even more so without needing to contend with other chord progressions. And as we build in the piece, we get louder and louder, and a lot of that is captured really neatly by the production quality, as in we're really tight with the compression, limiting all out on the tracks, and it sounds commercial grade on that side of things. But it's also knowing how to notch the instruments within the frequency spectrum so they don't interfere or sort of like resonate too intently with one another. I think that it's just really cleverly designed to illustrate the heightening of the tension as we unfurl more context until we get to the end where there's that distorted telephone register and you're just kind of left figuring out what the hell just happened. It's a very kind of overwhelming experience. And if you're not used to this kind of music, I feel like it could be uncomfortable. But as someone who's listened to a lot of different music over the years, I just think that the experimental nature of it helps to make it stand out. And there's no fundamental issues here in terms of the actual composition itself. It's well produced and well performed. There's moments of real beauty as a closing note as well, with these kind of paddish kind of tails, such as in around the 30-second mark with the Life is Pain part. There's these kind of pure notes that are sort of sub layers that go boom. They just kind of fade off into the ether there. It's kind of gorgeous in a weird way. Thematically, it's minor oriented because of the subject matter. It's a mixture of aggression and I think sadness there. The suffering that we're going through isn't something we're necessarily enjoying by any means, but we're also telling people to often stay away, you know. We're telling them to back off. We're accepting that life and suffering is pain, and we're not going to have anyone else add to that. So we're kind of staking our turf. Given the subject matter that's discussed within the lyrics, this makes a lot of sense from vocal perspective. The calm manner in which we communicate for some parts of it, despite a bit of kind of angst again, it contrasts with the kind of depravity of some of those bass and synth textures, as well as the vocal modulations. And I just think there's an interesting equilibrium struck there tonally. Yeah, the chord choices and bass lines make sense. And I do think the mixture of, again, cinematic and more sort of like, like just the sort of dubstep or sort of Eddie Mish elements are a nice sort of like, they work well together. And they're handled really neatly in terms of the studio production, recording, mixing, mastering, which I feel is stellar in this one. I love the different ways that the vocals are produced, whether they're kind of modulated with effects or sort of like turned down an octave, or if you've got just the main sort of raw vocals with the ones on the side coming in as we go forward into the piece. There are no issues whatsoever with the fundamental sort of recording or sort of like processing sides of it. The different bass sort of drum pad, synthetic woodwindy elements there, any of the other sort of noisy or air candy bits there, they're all nicely balanced within the frequency spectrum and the stereo field with it surrounding you and the headphones being kind of claustrophobic at times. The compression on parts adding a nice sense of punch to it and push. The synth sequences and any sort of like upper like register squeals there that go on the tails there have a nice sort of like sense of life to them and a breathiness without being too squeezed. And almost sounds spooky at times with how they kind of flutter in the sides of the stereo field. It's like repeaters that are going dun 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 dun, which kind of affects you as a listener. I think it's designed to kind of attack you a little bit in a way that forces you to pay attention. And the pauses that we have where there's like a synth lead that kind of goes up and up and up and then kind of things stumble over with some percussive hits. It's like there is space, but because of the tightness of the gluing of the mix, it still sounds very smooth. You do get accents on certain parts, but it's just commercial grade in terms of the experience we're having. And I just feel like for the approach we're going for, the production is nice and loud without pumping, so the bus compression limiting was handled. I mean, to be fair, even if it does pump, it seems deliberate. And some of the reverse takes as well on some of the sort of string or sort of woodwind takes are just, they're just clever. You know, they add a kind of discord and kind of spooky influence to it, which makes sense with the kind of tone or vibe we're going for. So ultimately, I just feel this is a really positive review. I've got no real applicable constructive critique for 2 minutes 49. It's a very short track. There's absolutely no filler in it. I just think as a standalone concept, it works incredibly well. It just kind of, I think the more you listen to Serpentis, the more you understand what they're trying to approach with this, and it's just great to watch their journey or to listen through it. From a general listener's perspective, I really respect when musicians can put uncomfortable textures in a track and make it work, in part due to the drama of the lyrics or the kind of scope or aesthetic that they're going through with the overall kind of like vocal style, and kind of contrast it with more sort of familiar elements, again, like the kind of orchestral drums and sort of like the electronic basses and stuff like that. I think that if you can make that intensity work, even in an experimental perspective or a situation, it just makes for great music. So ultimately, really happy with this one. Thank you for watching my review of this track from an act named Saint Serpentis, titled SOL, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show them some love via their various social medias and Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe. Please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out!